Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Before we get started, it would help us out a lot if you could please subscribe and like this video. So last time we set up our Python environment, which included downloading Python onto our machine and installing it, as well as downloading PyCharm, so we have somewhere to edit our code. So in today's lesson, we're going to cover comments and variables. So a comment is denoted by the hash sign, and what comments do is they basically allow you to put notes throughout your code that will not be picked up when you run the code, so that you can kind of know what's going on as you write much larger programs. So it's always a good idea to comment often. So usually the general rule of thumb is to every few lines or block of code that does something, put a comment just describing what it does. So I'm writing here in just plain English that this is a comment, and when I run this code, this will not be perceived as valid Python syntax, so that way I know that I can write anything there, but the Python interpreter, when it actually runs your code, it won't run this. So I'm going to use comments to describe variables and what we're going to talk about today. So a variable is just a way to store information that you want to use later. So say, for example, you want to store someone's age, or maybe have a sentence that you want to use later on in the program. Variables allow you to assign it to some name that you decide and then use it by that name in the future. So that way you don't have numbers all over your code where you don't even know what they mean. This way you can have some descriptive, basically a descriptive way of knowing what you're working with, and it allows you to have a little bit more control. So there are a few different data types, and these are types that your variable can take. So for example, we have an int, a float, and a string. So an integer is just a number, a whole number, so things like 1, 3, 400, something like that. Now a float, you can think of it as just having a decimal, so 1.1 is a float, 6.3, 6.31, anything that has a decimal will be considered a float. And then finally, a string is probably most similar to just a bunch of characters. So you denote this with a quote, a single or double quote, it doesn't matter, and we could have something like, please input your name, something like that. So three main data types, and we're going to go over how to assign these now. So in other languages, if you're familiar with any other language, a lot of times you have to basically initialize your data type before you assign the variable. So one of the benefits of Python is that it can interpret the type of what you're trying to assign. So I mentioned before, let's say you wanted to store something, some information about an age. So we can just assign age equal to 30. So what this basically does is we have some memory location that corresponds to age, and we are assigning the value of 30 here. So like I said, Python will interpret the type, and because this doesn't have any decimal places and it's a number, it'll automatically be an int. So now later on, if I wanted to print that age or do anything with that age, I can actually just call it by what we assigned here. So I always go ahead and run this, and you'll see that 30 gets printed here. So now for floats, we can have a variable called, let's call it myFloat, and we will assign that equal to 2.22. And let's assign some string, and we can call this name, and let's assign this to Bob. Let's give him a capital there. So now we have three variables, one int, a float, and a string. So now the important thing to note here is that with strings, unlike in other languages, you can use either single or double quotes here. So it's completely valid if I wanted to use double quotes. It's up to you. It's very important to not mix and match. So if I tried to say, in my string here I wanted to have a double quote, then it would complain, PyCharm would tell me to complain, and you would have to just switch out the outer quotations to be single, so that way now we actually have this quote inside of it. So you can do a lot with variables, and in general, any time that you want to do anything with your data, you're going to have to assign it. So it's important to note that we use a single equal here. You can name them just about everything, except you cannot lead a variable name with a number. So something like this would not be valid, and it will complain. So definitely pay attention to when it has these underlines, and it will throw errors in the corner here. So This was just a basic introduction to how to assign variables. We will see them in pretty much every lesson moving forward. But the main takeaways for this lesson is that it's very important to use comments, especially when you're just starting out, because if you were to ask for help, it's always good if you write what you expect to happen, so that later on, if either you or someone else is helping you debug, they know what your purpose was before you tried to do it. So that's it for this video. So again, please like and subscribe and stay tuned, and next time we will go in a little bit more into the Python language.